Hey guys, Ryan Biddulph here, blogging from paradise. What you have means nothing, and who you are means everything. Who you are is everything. You and I, guys, we're spirit. The possessions that we appear to own, including the body, the things, they're symbols, which are in and of themselves worthless because they fade, they dissolve. Obviously, people with a spiritual base who are thinking super deeply in their minds that are thinking super deeply, begin to understand that God created spirit eternal. That's what God created. So anything that dies, anything that's not eternal, he doesn't know about. Not his dominion. It's the dominion of the ego. The tricky part of this, guys, is really ultimately you and I have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, tricked by the ego to believe that all the things in the world are valuable and that God is dead or that God doesn't exist. Because in our mind, until we train it, we're living through the senses. So we think, okay, if I can acquire enough things in the mind, I'll be safe, I'll be secure, I'll be free. Now, people who acquire a lot of things who in their mind feel lacking, they feel unloved, they feel spurned, rejected, they feel undeserving. When they acquire a lot of things like, say, money and property and all this stuff, those feelings in their mind become amplified. And that's why on a worldly level, you'll see people or bodies kill themselves or live in severe depression or become alcoholics or drug addicts or sex addicts. So they acquire all this money and all these things, believing that getting stuff that's illusory, that will fade, even if you appear to pile it up and you think in your human lifetime, quote unquote, what appears to be a human lifetime, that it will never go away and you'll always have that security. As long as you have the fear in your mind of not being enough, that massive fortune and those things will just reflect back to you that you're not enough. And it will be more acute, this pain, because you think, okay, now I got all this money. Now I can feel whole and complete. But if that fear is still in your mind, it will feel even more intense, because then if you have whatever, $50 million and you still feel like you're not enough in your mind, which of course you will feel that way until you face the fear in your mind, then you feel even more depressed because it's like, oh my God, the $50 million of things, money, the illusion wasn't the answer. Oh my God, what am I going to do next? I know more money isn't the answer now, but then I know, like, what is it? And instead of exploring that fear, a lot of people turn to addiction to push it out of their awareness, and their life gets worse and worse and worse. And we've seen this again and again and again. One of the effects I found that's pretty interesting, and this applies to popularity: if I get enough body things to love me, admire me, then I'll be happy. I remember, I think he was an agent. I remember years ago, I listened to one of Tim Ferriss's podcasts, or I think I read the blog post that broke it down. And he spoke about an agent who professed to seeing something along the lines of a 100,000 effect. And he said there were a lot of world famous entertainers on the way up, or at least the number. Maybe not a lot, because not that many play this many people, but about 7 days, 1 week, roughly, maybe a little bit longer, after these entertainers, these musicians, would play in front of 100,000 people, they would immediately go into rehab. Now, it's pretty obvious what the deal was. These entertainers thought, if, in my mind, I can get 100,000 people to love me, to go to my concert, to shower everything on me, these horrible fears in my mind of whatever, not feeling enough, not feeling love, feeling rejected, will go away. So then they would play the concert, there'd be the initial high, egoic high, oh my God, all these people love me. And then the unconscious or the conscious mind, a day later, a week later, maybe 10 days later, would still be there. And they would sit there, and that deep fear and pain and suffering that was in their mind, that if they just face it and express it and forgive it, they'd be fine, appeared to become so much more palpable. Because then it's like, oh my God, it's still there. And then instead of feeling it and expressing it, they would sprint to alcohol to push the feelings down, which of course you push it out of awareness. It's not going away. It's going to just become stronger. You see how the ego is. It's very clever and it's very insane. But this is another example, guys, of like acquiring things, acquiring bodies, or getting bodies to love you. Go into rehab. And they go into rehab, alcoholic binge, drug binge, pushing that fear and that pain out of the awareness instead of facing it. Because that's the only answer, guys. It doesn't matter how much you acquire. Until you face your fears, they'll always be there. And in most cases, they become acutely more painful. Not that they are, because it's an illusion, because you just think like that's the answer. Then you realize that getting stuff and things isn't the answer. Then you're like, oh my God, it's a nightmare until you face the fear. But ultimately, you're everything. You have everything because you're spirit. And spirit is limitless. It's eternal. It's everywhere. That's your identity. It's not a body. It's not a thing. It's not anything that dies. It's not anything that, well, all things either die or dissolve because God didn't make them. If God made them, you couldn't sense it through the five senses. It's spirit. It's the spirit in the things. That's the reality. And that's what you want to train yourself to see, that who you are, your identity, is spirit only. That's when you'll begin to develop a greater peace of mind, a greater sense of calm, and you'll also see through the illusion with mind training of all the things that fight and die, all the things that are illusions, yet they appear to the senses and to untrained minds to be so real. Wars, death, sickness, abuse, victim mentality. But since everything is not real, and the only, in terms of living things, the only reality or truth there is spirit, of course, spirit can't be victimized because it's limitless, eternal love. Spirit can't be at war. The ego can, but the ego is an illusion. Things can, body things can, illusion. It takes a lot of mind training, guys. There's no way around it. And the training is you digging into your own mind to see the fears that you're projecting onto the world. But the more you do that, you start realizing in your mind this little more of an identification with spirit, with not everything, but the limitless, the invisible. You start identifying with the invisible. You start realizing a little bit like, man, I'm forever. And I'm beyond the world, so there's nothing more to worry. There's nothing to worry about. These little glimpses, and then that becomes more predominant. And then you see the love under the things, even if the things appear to be really angry or upset or violent. And then you look back through your own experiences and you begin to realize that the only reality in those experiences with the spirit that you are, and the tougher experiences that we set up for ourselves egoically, really, really rough experience in terms of things and illusions, but that appear to be very real at the time, you see those are opportunities for forgiveness, to let the illusion out of your mind, to express the fear or whatever was there. Because when you start coming across these concepts for the first time, the ego will say, oh my God, not true, insane, Crazy. It'll fight for hell. It'll fight for the death wish because it will say, oh my God, this person took advantage of me. This bad thing happened to me. And in terms of things, in terms of ego, it appeared to be. But appearances are not realities. Illusions are not true. It seemed to happen, but it didn't. And it doesn't mean you're not going to go into your mind and forgive and express the rage and the grief and the guilt. Like, that expression is a really important part of this, guys. But as you express it, you see that those feelings that you buried in your mind, and not projecting onto others, crying into a pillow, punching a pillow, don't project it onto others because that keeps the illusion intact. Do your best not to. And if you do, forgive yourself. You knew not what you did, right? But when you get the guilt and the rage and the anger and the doubt and the disgust and when you get that out of your mind, that's how you start to make these realizations. That you're everything, you're it all. And that we're just one spirit. Truthfully. A little bit at a time, and I'm learning with you guys, sharing these videos, being open, no private thoughts, no people pleasing. Like David Hoffmeister says, Course in Miracles teacher. No private thoughts, no people pleasing. So these are me sharing my private thoughts and then not trying to please people, not trying to fit into anything egoically, fit into their expectations, facing my fears, just putting it out there. And the more you do that, you start to just gradually migrate from the world of stuff and things and these illusions that all go away. If you cling to something that goes away, you're going to suffer. I mean, that's a basic Buddhist tenet. Yet, in the Course, you begin to learn, Course in Miracles, or just meditating, that it's easy enough to get past the suffering, although it might be uncomfortable because you have to face your fears, when you just learn that you're not the thing. You're not the body. You're the spirit that appears to be inside of it. And then when you see that the body is an illusion, then you see a little bit at a time like, oh, I'm not even inside of it. You don't identify with it. You start identifying with that eternal spirit. And of course, the more you identify with spirit, you're like, oh yeah, things really aren't. And you'll use them. It's not saying you're going to forgive the world. It's not saying you're totally going to give up money. But you'll see them as illusory, made up symbols that you still believe in on some level, a bit, not making it a false idol, worshiping it, and that you'll use. So when you see money a little bit more like monopoly money and less like, oh my God, it's a God, it's a false idol. As long as I have money, I'm secure, I'm safe, I'm loved. And then you figure out sooner than later, everybody does. Or some people don't. Again, you see people that they just end their lives or they just live in depression or rage and they never face their fear in their mind. Once you face the fear in your mind, it feels rough when you express it in those moments, but then life gets easier because you see you're it all. And you're not the thing, you're not the body. And acquiring things, you see it more as just neutral illusion, made up, but just neutral. And you could use the symbols as long as you believe in them, but everything is not real. It's a symbol used by, if you go there, that part of your mind, but used by the Holy Spirit to wake you up, to wake up your sleeping mind. It's beautiful, guys. The more you do the mind training. Uncomfortable? Definitely. But what's the point? You're not here to live in an illusion and suffering in hell. That's what the world is. I've heard different terms and it's all symbols, but the way when you think egoically, when you're not thinking through spirit or your intuition or your gut or love, when you're thinking through fear, the terms I've heard used are hell realm, psychoplanet. And when you step into your mind, you'll see it is not reality. It's an illusion. But when you're thinking through fear, it does appear to be a psychoplanet and a hell realm. Yet when you forgive the fear, then you see through it. So guys, that's it for today. I talk about blogging tip stuff a lot of the time. On bloggingparadise.com. Courses, ebooks, all that good stuff. But of course I do some mind training as well. And I do integrate a lot of mindset stuff into my blogging teaching. So until next time, you know what to do. Enjoy paradise, guys.